Is Halloween Ends really the end? And why does its star think the film will make fans very angry? Here's all you need to know before the big premiere. The official release date for Halloween Ends is October 14th, 2022, just in time for the holiday. Filming for Halloween Ends initially began in January 2022 and concluded a few months later in March. Pre-pandemic, Blumhouse Studios had planned to release Halloween Kills in October 2020 and Halloween Ends 1 year later in 2021. Of course, delays due to COVID-19 threw a wrench into production, so the pair of sequels were pushed back by a year. Studios generally like to release Halloween films, around Halloween, which seems like a no-brainer.
You know, it's Halloween. I guess everyone's entitled to one good scare, huh?
This was the case for the first 5 original Halloween films, which all debuted theatrically in the month of October. The 6th just barely squeaked in with a September 29th release date. This trend was surprisingly dropped in favor of summer releases for Halloween H2O and Halloween Resurrection, as well as Rob Zombie's duo of reboots. However, with the appearance of David Gordon Green's new trilogy, Halloween has returned to its classic fall schedule, with Halloween Ends wrapping up the tradition by releasing around the same time of year as its predecessors. The 2018 Halloween film brought Jamie Lee Curtis back to the iconic role of Laurie Strode and introduced 2 new generations in Laurie's daughter Karen, played by Judy Greer, and her granddaughter Allison, played by Andi Matichak. Though this central trio survived that film and made it to the climax of the follow-up, Halloween Kills ended on a shocking note as Michael murdered Karen just before the credits started.
So many people are dead, we're not equipped.
Curtis and Matichak are back one last time in Halloween Ends, with James Jude Courtney and original actor Nick Castle joining forces to bring Michael Myers to life, as they did on the 2 previous entries. Kyle Richards is also back once again as Lindsay Wallace, Laurie's 1978 babysitting charge, who managed to again narrowly escape Michael's knife in Halloween Kills. Trilogy mainstays Will Patton and Omar Dorsey round out the returning cast members. Joining the cast is former Guiding Light star Michael O'Leary as Dr. Mathis, a character mentioned but not seen in Halloween Kills. Rowan Campbell of Hulu's The Hardy Boys will also provide a fresh face as a new character named Corey Cunningham. The official synopsis for Halloween Ends explains that, rather than picking up exactly where we left off in Halloween Kills, the story will resume 4 years later. Laurie Strode and her granddaughter Allison are living together, and there's no Michael Myers in sight. We can assume that the movie will have Laurie and Michael locked in a final showdown of sorts. At least a final showdown for this iteration of the franchise. As for the fate of these 2 characters, who can say for certain? In an interview with Total Film magazine, Jamie Lee Curtis, producer Malika Akkad, and director David Gordon Green gave a few hints as to what audiences might expect from the final film in the trilogy. After Halloween Kills focused on the town of Haddonfield at large, it seems like we're in for a shift, with Akkad revealing that the final film in the trilogy will be, in his words, way more contained.
What's happening? It's disgusting.
It's Michael's gotta be.
As for Green, he went on to elaborate slightly, suggesting that the final Halloween film, which was originally planned to take place on the same 2018 Halloween night as both its predecessors, may be something fans won't expect. He told Total Film, "I get engaged by doing something different. If I was just going to be repetitive, I would hand the reins off to someone else." When you have that opportunity within an established franchise, it's really fun to think about how you can show different tones and perspectives and evolve. The iconic, not-so-sleepy town of Haddonfield, Illinois, is one of the most infamous movie towns in horror history, and also one of the deadliest. While the original John Carpenter film was shot in Los Angeles County, the most recent Halloween trilogy traveled to the opposite coast to film. The 2018 Halloween was mostly filmed in the Low Country of South Carolina. The second installment, Halloween Kills, was filmed mostly in North Carolina. Interestingly, Halloween Ends was shot primarily in and around the Savannah, Georgia area, though not exclusively. According to the film's IMDb page, photography for Ends also took place in part around Salt Lake City, Utah, a vast departure from the East Coast locations and the film's Midwestern setting, leaving fans wondering just where the final installment might take us. The new Halloween trilogy, beginning with the 2018 film, is largely the brainchild of filmmakers and longtime collaborators David Gordon Green and Danny McBride. Though Green and McBride were both new to the horror genre, they were longtime fans of John Carpenter and Deborah Hill's original 1978 Halloween, and opted to ignore all the previous sequels and remakes. Green went on to direct all 3 films in this new trilogy. Evidently, even though they ignored all the previous installments in the franchise, it still reportedly took Green and McBride more than 80 drafts of the screenplay to get it right, with rewrites happening as late as 1 week before production, according to The Hollywood Reporter.
Michael Myers loose with a bunch of nutbags in Haddonfield on Halloween night?
The duo of Green and McBride returned to write the screenplay for Halloween Kills alongside Scott Teems, resulting in a sequel that proved more polarizing than its crowd-pleasing predecessor. Green and McBride also co-wrote the screenplay for Halloween Ends, this time alongside Paul Brad Logan and Chris Bernier. When 2018's Halloween was released, it was a simpler time. The film arrived in theaters and then quickly made its way to home video soon after, with the second and third films in David Gordon Green's planned trilogy being greenlit almost immediately following its success. Unfortunately, it would be another 3 years before Halloween Kills would be released due to the COVID-19 pandemic, with the sequel's initial release of October 2020 being shifted to October 2021. Halloween Ends began filming not long after the release of Halloween Kills, with a set release date for October 2022. With only a year between these 2 films, Green's 2 sequels will follow an 80s slasher movie tradition of immediate back-to-back entries. The earlier Halloween series even sporadically followed this pattern for a while. Halloween 2 was released in October 1981, continuing the story from the first film, with the largely unrelated Halloween 3 Season of the Witch coming out a year later. In October 1988, Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers was released, which brought Myers back from his comatose state, leading into Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers the following October. Halloween Ends is set to arrive in theaters on October 14th, 2022, and as with Halloween Kills before it, will also be made available on Peacock for the first 60 days of the film's release. The Halloween franchise is a bit complicated, but most long-running horror series are. Including Halloween Ends, there are 13 total films in the saga, though not all of them are necessary to enjoy this final trilogy installment. The only movie in the anthology that every film tends to stem from is the original 1978 Halloween, which introduced the world to both Michael Myers and Laurie Strode. This masterpiece has become an icon over the past 4 decades, and no matter how many new Halloween sequels or reboots hit the screen, none can escape the shadow of the original. The original Halloween 2, Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers, Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers, and Halloween, The Curse of Michael Myers all follow in the timeline begun with the original. The third installment, Halloween 3, Season of the Witch, has nothing to do with the overall continuity, beyond the original movie playing on TV within its story about killer Halloween masks. Then, in 1998, Halloween H2O 20 years later was released to commemorate the anniversary of the original Halloween, thus ignoring all the sequels except Halloween 2. This film would spawn a sequel of its own, Halloween Resurrection, which would soon be ignored by Rob Zombie's 2 Halloween reboot films beginning in 2007.
Michael, you know I'm not really here.
Halloween Ends fits in a timeline composed of the original 1978 film, the 2018 Halloween, and Halloween Kills. This effectively sets aside all the convoluted sequel plot threads concerning secret familial relationships and ancient cults, instead focusing in on the pure slasher element of an unknowable killer and his tenacious prey. There's no doubt that David Gordon Green's take on the Halloween mythos isn't for everybody. Removing the brother-sister connection between Michael Myers and Laurie Strode was a gutsy move, especially given that the vast majority of the franchise has kept that part of their story intact. This makes sense given that John Carpenter himself made them siblings while working on Halloween 2 and the expanded TV broadcast of the original film. Carpenter admitted to comicbook.com in 2019, "I came up with this brother thing. It was awful, just awful, but I did it." Nevertheless, the 2018 Halloween revival disregarded this plotline completely, with Carpenter's blessing opting to start anew with only the original 1978 film remaining a part of the story. This alone was frustrating for some fans, though for others it was a new beginning and one that sparked new life in an otherwise aimless franchise. According to series star Jamie Lee Curtis, many fans might not love Halloween Ends, the final installment in this rebooted trilogy of slashers. She told NME, "It's going to make people very angry, and it's going to be shocking because it asks a lot of questions, so that's all I can tell you." Wherever the conclusion to this modern Halloween trilogy takes us, it seems it will be somewhere we've never gone before. This might be scary to some longtime Michael Myers fans, but the possibility of an unprecedented and surprising conclusion may be just the kind of uncertainty the Halloween franchise needs. For more than 40 years, Jamie Lee Curtis has come and gone from her role as the iconic final girl, Laurie Strode, continuously escaping the clutches of Michael Myers. Now, Halloween Ends promises, well, an end to all that.
Evil dies tonight!
This means that either Laurie is set to die in combat against Michael or live happily ever after once he's 6 feet under. Whichever ending befalls our horror heroine, it will surely be thrilling to see her story get a definitive conclusion here. Jamie Lee Curtis has implied in a video promoting Halloween Ends that this is her last time playing Laurie Strode. She went on to explain to Total Film, "I'm not saying something like, oh, because I die. It's nothing to do with that. I'm talking about emotionally what they've constructed. I think it will be a spectacular way to end this trilogy." With a title like Halloween Ends, there are some pretty serious implications attached. No doubt, this is the end to David Gordon Green's sequel trilogy of Halloween films, meant to be a love letter of sorts to the original John Carpenter classic. With Jamie Lee Curtis evidently satisfied with the film's conclusion and the plot seemingly wrapped up here, it sounds like Halloween Ends might actually be the final chapter of the Halloween saga. And what better film to end on than the 13th? Of course, John Carpenter has his own thoughts on the continuation of the Halloween brand. Carpenter told comicbook.com, "If you take a dollar sign and attach it to anything, it will live. If the dollar sign is not big enough, no matter what, it will not live." This time, I do not know. They really want to end. They're going to shut it off. End it. It's what David has in mind. That's fine. In an interview with Screen Rant, producer Jason Blum went on record and reminded us that this is Blumhouse Productions' last Halloween movie. And while that doesn't necessarily mean that Michael Myers won't return someday, their work on the franchise is complete. Blum said, "This is our last one, and I think people will be very happy." So it looks like Halloween Ends is the culmination of the franchise as we know it currently, but that doesn't mean it's the end for Halloween as a whole.